But why, Mr. O? Who is it? I can't tell you, Ryan. I swear you're the most hardworking and smart employee I've ever had. But try to understand my situation. I don't want to lose everything. I understand. I'm sorry, Ryan. Confusion and despair cloud Ryan's thoughts as she stepped out of the office building holding her belongings. Suddenly, a sleek black car stopped in front of her. The window rolled down, revealing none other than John Jungkook, her ex, and now a top billionaire CEO. Get in, I said calmly without looking at her. Ryan got shocked after seeing him, but she composed herself. She glared at him and started to walk away. Suddenly, someone pushed her into the car, closing the door behind her. She sat stunned as Jungkook's intense gaze met hers. She tried to open the door, but it was locked. What is this? Let me out. I spat at him in anger. So you got fired. Her head snapped toward me. How'd you know? 'Cause I was the reason. I looked at her, smirking at her reaction. Why did you do that? No one will hire you, Ryan. And if they try, their company will crumble. I'll make sure of it. Ryan's hand crumbled into fist, her voice trembling with anger. Why would you do that? You know why. You can't do this, Jungkook. I don't love you. Just leave me alone. I left you months ago. Can't you let me live in peace? Jungkook's jaw tightened, her words stabbing at the heart. He tried to shield with his cold demeanor. Bold of you to think I'd let you go that easily. Marry me and work for me. Or starve. Your choice. I smirked. Ryan got taken aback by a certain condition. Marry you? I won't. I said sternly. Then starve yourself. No one's gonna hire you unless they want to go bankrupt. He unlocked the car door and leaned back. He stone cold, but his eyes were betraying the pain he felt by her rejection. The choice is yours, Ryan. Ryan angrily stormed out of the car, slamming the door behind her. Days passed. Wine, exhausted and hopeless, kept applying for jobs but faced rejection after rejection. Interviewers apologized profusely, saying they can't hire her without facing bankruptcy. I used my all saving. How will I give this month's rent? It was evening. She was walking down the street with heavy steps, despair clearly visible on her face. She remembered Jungkook's words. She knew he wanted to take revenge on her. She was happy to meet him and see him again, but her heart broke after seeing his cold behavior toward her. Of course, it was understandable after what she did with him. She left him just leaving behind a note saying she doesn't love him anymore. She loves someone else. Tears escaped from her eyes. She was walking slowly when the familiar car stopped in front of her. Get in the car, Ryan. She ignored him and started walking faster. Jungkook, frustrated, got out of the car and caught up to her. Leave me alone, Jungkook. Ignoring her protest, he picked her up and threw her over his shoulder. Ryan gasped. She pounded her fist against his back, but he didn't falter. He opened the door and placed her inside on the passenger seat before driving off. What are we doing here, Jungkook? We were at the courthouse. Jungkook, ignoring her, stepped out, opening the door for her. Ryan glared at him, not getting out. Get out before I make you. She got out, knowing very well what he was capable of. He caught her wrist and started dragging her inside. Leave me, Jungkook. What are you doing? He tightened his grip on my wrist, which is gonna leave marks for sure. He dragged me inside. He placed a marriage contract in front of me. Sign it. I won't. Jungkook closed his eyes, trying to calm himself. Sign it unless you want to spend the rest of your life like this, starving yourself to. Mine's heart broke listening to his hurtful words. She hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes. She looked at Jungkook. Deep down, she knew she still loved him. After a long silence, she picked up the pen and signed the papers because she knew she wasn't alone in this and she can't make her baby suffer because of her. Jungkook exhaled quietly, relief washing over him. Finally, she was his. Good choice. Jungkook bring her to his house. He left her there and went toward his room, locking the door. He changed his room. She walked toward the room which once they both shared. Everything is same. I looked around but got shocked. Our pictures were still there. He did not remove anything. I walked toward the table and picked our photo frame. Tears welled up in my eyes, tracing our beautiful picture. I flinched when the door opened with a loud voice. Who told you to come here? Jungkook, he cut me off by gripping my wrist and started dragging me out. Jungkook, it's hurting. Leave me. He dragged me out and slammed me on the wall. I tried to push him, but he caught my wrists, pinning them beside my head. With whose permission you went there? I wanted to. Who gave you permission? I wanted to sleep so. And who told you that you can sleep there? Where will I sleep then? I pressed my head harder on the wall when he leaned close to me. What do you think? I spoke in a low, husky voice. I smirked, seeing her flustered face. Jungkook, no. Why? You belong to me now. I'm your husband. Don't you think you should fulfill your duties as a wife? I examined her face. Mine looked down and tears escaped from her eyes. She was regretting everything she did to him. It was hurting her to see the hate for her in his eyes. Jungkook stared at her for a few minutes before gripping her wrist again. He dragged her inside his room. Jungkook, please don't. I got terrified. I can't do this. You'll sleep on the couch or floor. Choice is yours. He said and walked toward the bathroom. He stopped and turned toward her. It's a last warning. Don't you dare go to that room again. Ryan started working at Jungkook's company, trying to keep a low profile. Employees didn't know her connection to Jungkook, but spread rumors about her being favored by CEO. Ryan knew, but she brushed off their whispers, focusing on her work. Ryan sat on the couch in the living room, her gaze fixed on the door of the bedroom she and Jungkook once shared. The house was quiet, but her mind was loud, flooded with memories from a happier time. She remembered the way they laughed together, the way he used to hold her close. Without realizing it, her feet carried her to the room. She opened the drawer slowly, her heart aching as she stepped inside. The familiar scent of the room hit her like a wave, and her eyes immediately landed on the pictures displayed on the dresser. Smiling softly, she walked toward them, her fingers brushing over the frames. One photo showed Jungkook hugging her tightly, while she laughed, his face filled with pure love. Her heart clenched as tears pricked in her eyes. Just then Jungkook entered the house. His footsteps echoed down the hallway, but she was too lost in her memories to notice. When Jungkook reached the hallway, his sharp eyes caught the door to their old bedroom open. His anger flared and he rushed inside. Didn't I tell you to stay out of here? Wine flashed at his tone, immediately snapping out of her daze. She turned to him with wide eyes, guilt written all over her face. I'm sorry. She tried to walk past him, but Jungkook slammed the door shut, pinning her against it with his hands on either side of her. She froze, her heart racing as he leaned in, his eyes blazing with anger. You never listen, do you? Wine looked down, avoiding his gaze as she whispered again. I said I'm sorry. Do you think I'm keeping these things because I still love you? No, I'm keeping them to remind myself that you don't deserve love or anything from me. You're a cheater. Vines had snapped up at his words, her anger igniting. Without thinking, she raised her hand and slapped him hard across the face. Jungkook's head turned slightly from the force, his jaw tightening as his cheeks burned. His eyes darkened, and before Vine could react, he grabbed her face and Vine's hand pushed at his chest, but Jungkook's grip was firm. Her struggles grew weaker as she surrendered to the for a brief moment, but she didn't respond, her mind racing with conflicting emotions. Finally, Jungkook pulled back slightly, both of them gasping for air. Vine used the moment to push him away with all her strength, stumbling as she rushed out of the room. Jungkook stood frozen for a moment, his his emotions in turmoil. He ran a hand through his hair, regret flickering in his eyes before it was replaced by anger once again. As he remembered everything, he turned his gaze falling on the room filled with memories and let out a frustrated sigh. Later, Jungkook walked to his own room, only to stop at the sight of Vian. She was curled up on the floor, wrapped tightly in the blanket. The sound of her quiet sniffles reached his ear, and he knew she was crying. His chest tightened at the sight, but he clenched his fist and forced himself to ignore her. Turning away, he walked into the bathroom, slamming the door behind him as he tried to drown out the sound of her sobs. In the company, Jungkook did not make it easy for Vian. He frequently called her into his office, often assigning trivial tasks like making coffee. His touch was subtle yet deliberate. Each moment sent shivers down her spine, leaving her conflicted. It wasn't like Vian was complaining, but her heart ached, convinced that he didn't love her anymore, and these actions of him meant nothing to him. Though Jungkook never forced her into anything, he made sure his presence was deeply felt in her life. Jungkook leaned back in his office chair, staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. His mind drifted to the first view he saw Vine after 3 long months, a moment etched in his memory like a scar. It was a business party, a high profile event where Jungkook's company, Vine's employer, and many other high profiles in business were present. Jungkook arrived, his confidence unwavering, until his gaze locked onto her. She stood in a corner talking to her boss, her laughter filling the room. It had been 3 months since she left him, and yet seeing her again hit him like a freight train. There she was, laughing like nothing happened, like I didn't exist. Did she even think about me once? He watched her from across the room, his hands clenching into fist as her boss leaned in slightly, too close for his liking. The jealousy roared inside him, impossible to ignore. He didn't care about the party anymore. All he wanted was to drag her out from there and demand answers. So was he the one for whom you left? He made his way over, his eyes darkening with each step. But just as he reached them, her boss turned to introduce himself. Mr. John, pleased to finally meet you. This is my secretary, Ryan. Ryan's smile faltered when she saw him, her eyes wide with shock. Jungkook stared at her, his expression unreadable, though his heart thundered in his chest. Figure's mind. His gaze lingered on Ryan for a moment longer than necessary before he turned away, his jaw tight. That night, he drank more than usual, the image of her laughing with another man haunting him. Ryan walked into Jungkook's spacious office holding a tray with his coffee. He wasn't at his desk, so she carefully placed the cup on the table and turned to leave. Just as he reached the door, Jungkook appeared now out of nowhere, his presence filling the room like a storm. Leaving so soon, Ryan froze for a moment, then turned around, her voice calm but distant. You were not here, so I left your coffee on the table. She stepped aside to walk past him, but Jungkook moved closer, his eyes scanning her face. Before she could react, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her closer. Jungkook, what are you?